As the 2011 horsepower Lotus Evija demonstrates, the most powerful cars of the near future will be EVs, but remarkable outputs have nevertheless been achieved with engines fueled by petrol or diesel. Here we're looking at 20 of the strongest examples created in the US, all of them available in cars or non-commercial trucks sold to the public for road use. So no 11,000 horsepower top-fuel dragsters, for example. They're listed in ascending order of their quoted outputs, with the caveat that there was a change from gross to net horsepower in 1972, which muddies the waters considerably. Only the most powerful unit from any family is included. This means that what you'll be reading isn't a top 20 in the usual sense, since many engines have been ignored because they are outpowered by close relatives, but it adds variety, and we all like variety. Chrysler Firepower. 390 horsepower. The Firepower was the first of 3 generations of Chrysler V8 engine collectively known as Hemi. Introduced in the 1951 model year, it was the only engine fitted to the first 4 models in the 300-letter series, each of which was produced for just a single year. It was discontinued after the 300D of 1958, in which it produced 380 horsepower from 6.4 liters if fitted with twin 4-barrel carburetors. Optional fuel injection raised the output to 390 horsepower, the highest achieved in any Firepower. It's important to note that this was a gross figure, measured when the engine was not burdened by power-sapping ancillaries necessary for it to function in a car. The net figure, as used from 1972 onwards, would have been lower, but still comfortably over 300 horsepower. Chrysler RB. 400 horsepower. The RB was a big block V8 offered in capacities of up to 7.2 liters, but the most powerful version fitted to a road car measured 6.8 liters. This was used in the 300F of 1960, in which it normally produced 375 horsepower gross. As an extra cost option, customers could order a 400 horsepower version, which was mated to a 4-speed manual gearbox rather than the usual 3-speed automatic. The highest gross figure for a 7.2 was 390 horsepower. The Max Wedge variant was rated at 420, but this was intended only for use in drag racing. Ford Mel. 400 horsepower. The Mel, which stood for Mercury Edsel Lincoln, was Ford's rival to the contemporary Chrysler RB. In 7.0-liter form it was easily capable of producing 360 horsepower, which was the standard output of the Mercury Park Lane. In 1958, however, Mercury offered an uprated version with 3 2-barrel carburetors. Known as the Super Marauder, it produced 400 horsepower, and was an option on every model Mercury sold in that year. Oldsmobile Rocket. 400 horsepower. In 1970, the final model year of the first-generation front-wheel drive Toronado, Oldsmobile created the optional W34 package to boost the output of its second-generation V8, which by that time had reached its maximum capacity of 7.5 liters. As standard, the V8 was rated at 375 horsepower, which you might have thought would be about enough. The uprated camshaft and dual exhaust system included in the package raised this to 400, and for good measure Oldsmobile added special transmission calibration for quicker acceleration. Cummins B Series. 420 horsepower. The first and only 6-cylinder diesel on this list is a 6.7-liter member of the long-running B Series family, supplied by Cummins to Stellantis for use in its Ram heavy-duty trucks. The standard output version produces 370 horsepower and is available in the 2500 and 3500, but the 3500 also has the option of the high-output derivative which produces 420 horsepower, 10 more than the 6.4-liter petrol Hemi V8 in the same range. In terms of torque, the high output easily surpasses the others. It produces 1,075 pound-feet, well above the standard output's 850 pound-feet and the Hemi's 429 pound-feet. Chrysler Hemi. 425 horsepower. Originally intended only for racing, the first Chrysler V8 officially called Hemi, and nicknamed Elephant, later became available in several Chrysler, Plymouth and Dodge road cars, including the aerodynamically adventurous Dodge Charger Daytona and Plymouth Superbird, and also in the Monteverdi High built in Switzerland. Measuring 7.0 liters, it was always officially rated at 425 horsepower gross, though in 1971 Chrysler and Plymouth also published a more realistic net rating of 350 horsepower. Ford FE. 425 horsepower. The FE V8 made its debut in the 1958 model year, when the 5.9-liter version was fitted to several models produced by the ill-fated Edsel brand. Two 7.0-liter variants arrived later, of which the more powerful was known as the 427, even though its capacity in non-metric units was actually 426 cubic inches. The 427 was available in two power outputs, the higher being 425 horsepower. In this form, which first appeared in 1964, it was fitted to the Ford Galaxie and Fairlane and the Mercury Comet, Monterey and Park Lane. Ford Godzilla. 430 horsepower. The Godzilla is a petrol-fueled V8 introduced in the 2020 model year with a capacity of 7.3 liters, and has since become available as a 6.8. It's fitted to larger vehicles, and usually has an output of under 400 horsepower. The exception is the version fitted to the F-Series Super Duty trucks, which are in what's known as the heavy-duty class. For this application, the 7.3-liter Godzilla produced 430 horsepower and 485 pound-feet of torque. Chevrolet Big Block. 450 horsepower. Chevrolet has been producing big block V8s since the 1950s, though latterly they have been used more for load-hauling vehicles than for passenger cars. In 1970, the 7.4-liter version normally produced 360 horsepower, but it could optionally be upgraded to 450 in that year's Chevy Chevelle, pictured. Another member of the same family which you can buy right now is the 10.4-liter ZZ632. This produces 1,004 horsepower, net, and 876 pound-feet of torque, but it's a crate engine not fitted as standard to any production model, so for the purposes of this gallery it doesn't count. GM Duramax V8 to 470 horsepower. The L5P became the newest member of the 6.6-liter turbo diesel Duramax V8 family in 2017, when it produced 445 horsepower at 2,800 revolutions per minute and 910 pound-feet at 1,600 revolutions per minute. For 2024, it has been upgraded to 470 horsepower and 975 pound-feet at the same engine speeds. It's fitted to two very similar heavy-duty pickup trucks, the Chevrolet Silverado HD, pictured, and the GMC Sierra HD, the latter being more or less the same as the former but with different badges and styling details. Ford Powerstroke. 500 horsepower. Also known as the Scorpion, the 6.7-liter turbo diesel Powerstroke V8 was introduced in 2011, replacing an earlier 6.4-liter engine from the same family, and has gradually become more powerful. Its 475 horsepower and 1,050 pound-feet were both best in class, and a high-output version arrived in the 2023 model year with 500 horsepower and 1,200 pounds, featuring the high output as standard in the top-spec limited versions of the F250, F350, pictured, and F450 Super Duty trucks, and an extra cost option in others. Cadillac Blackwing. 550 horsepower. Code named LTA. The Blackwing was a 4.2-liter twin-turbo V8 available very briefly in the Cadillac CT6 luxury saloon. In the CT6 Platinum, it produced 500 horsepower and 574 pound-feet, while a version in a higher state of tune fitted to the CT6V, pictured, made 550 horsepower and 640 pounds, featuring introduced in 2019. Both models lasted only until the CT6 range was discontinued the following year. Today, Cadillac makes Blackwing versions of the CT4V and CT5 Volts, but neither they nor any other vehicle use this engine. Chrysler Viper. 645 horsepower. The Viper V10 engine was only ever used in the Dodge Viper sports car. As launched in 1992, it already measured a formidable 8.0 liters, but its capacity was gradually increased over the years, finally reaching 8.4 liters. The power and torque outputs rose too, peaking at 645 horsepower and 600 pound-feet in 2015. Ford EcoBoost. 660 horsepower. Of the many Ford engines wearing the EcoBoost badge, the twin-turbo 3.5-liter V6 is by far the strongest. As far as road-going applications are concerned, the ultimate version was the one fitted to later examples of the Ford GT, which produced 660 horsepower and 550 pound-feet of torque. Still higher figures have been reached, but only in GTs built specifically for track, rather than road, use. Ford Modular. 760 horsepower. The most powerful engine in the Modular family is also the most powerful ever fitted to a production Ford. Known as the Predator, The supercharged 5.2-liter V8 produces 760 horsepower and 625 pound-feet, and has only ever been fitted to the Mustang Shelby GT500 introduced in 2020. Another version called Carnivore made its debut in the 2023 F-150 Raptor high-performance pickup truck. Developed with off-roading in mind, this has slightly less power, a still more than reasonable 700 horsepower, but a superior torque rating of 640 pound-feet. Chevrolet Small Block, 772 horsepower. Of the many Chevrolet V8s bearing this name over the past 70 years, the most powerful fitted to a production car has been the supercharged 6.2-liter LT5 introduced in the 2019 Corvette ZR1. Its standard output was 755 horsepower, but it made 772 horsepower when fitted with the optional performance intake system. At the time of writing, no current generation mid-engine Corvette produces anything like this, though that may be about to change. Chrysler Hemi 3rd generation, 1025 horsepower. The SRT Demon 170, the seventh and final last call special edition versions of the Dodge Challenger, was powered by the most monumental production engine in Hemi history. If it sensed that it was running on E85 fuel, the supercharged 6.2-liter V8 could produce no less than 1025 horsepower and 945 pound-feet of torque. On E10 fuel, the figures were a still astonishing 900 horsepower and 810 pounds featuring at launch. Chrysler said that production would be limited to at most 3,300 units, 300 of which would be sold in Canada and the remainder in the US. Saleen LM, 1,500 horsepower. All versions of the Saleen S7 were powered by a 7.0-liter engine derived from the Ford Windsor V8. Power outputs varied considerably depending on how much, if any, forced induction was involved, but in twin-turbo form it was said to be as much as 1,300 horsepower. That claim was superseded by one made in 2019, when Saleen reported that the figure had been raised to 1,500 horsepower and 1,328 pound-feet of torque. SSC V8 to 1,750 horsepower. The Tuatara hypercar produced by SSC North America, formerly Shelby Supercars, has a mid-mounted twin-turbo 5.9-liter V8 engine whose output depends on what fuel it's running on. According to its maker, it produces 1,350 horsepower on 91-octane petrol and 1,750 horsepower on ethanol or methanol. A video released in 2022 shows the engine apparently achieving just short of 1,900 horsepower on the Nelson Racing Engine's dyno, though this is not an official figure. With a performance upgrade, and only if running on methanol, the V8 is reported to be capable of 2,200 horsepower in the Aggressor variant, but this is a track-only car whose performance, according to the SSC website, is not possible in the street-legal versions of the Tuatara. Hennessy Fury, 1,817 horsepower. Hennessy's Venom F5 is available in four forms: Coupe, Roadster, Pictured, Revolution Coupe and Revolution Roadster, of which the first and third had been sold out at the time of writing. All four are powered by the Fury engine, a 6.6-liter twin-turbo V8. In each application, it produces 1,817 horsepower and 1,193 pound-feet of torque, which makes the Venom F5 the most powerful non-electric road-going production car not only in the US but in global automotive history. Say goodbye to high energy bills with this ultra-efficient portable heater, now 50% off. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.